Hello, everybody. Welcome to our RAG Hack live streams.
RAG Hack is a free global hackathon happening from September 3rd to 16th. RAG is a technique to get a large language model to answer questions based off of your data. We have more than 25 live streams teaching you how to build RAG apps with different Microsoft technologies, plus 10 cash prizes for the best RAG apps in each category. So we're super excited to have you join us for this RAG Hack. And now a word from our friends at Reactor.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the next session of our RAG Hack 2024 series, RAG with Data Access Control. My name's Anna. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It'll be available to view on demand on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our presenters. Matt and Pamela, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela. I'm a Python Cloud Advocate, and you probably see me a lot during RAG Hack.
My name is Matt. I work on Azure AI Search, a program manager there.
All right, sweet. So I'm really excited for this topic. It is a topic that we've talked about before, but it's always a really, really interesting topic, and it's something that's really, really helpful for people. So let's get into it. So switching over to the slides. We're going to start with a brief, let's go to my slides instead. There we go. Yeah. So we'll start with a very brief review of RAG. If you have been watching the RAG Hack streams, then you know all about RAG. If you are new to RAG, then we're going to really briefly talk about it here. But what I recommend is that you go back and watch our RAG 101 and RAG with Python and all the sessions we have about the fundamentals of RAG, so that you can get a really good feel for how it is that we can write RAG applications. But basically, RAG is a way that we can take a user question, and then we search a database or a search engine with that user question, and we get back results that match the user's question. We send both the user question and the results to an LLM, and then we get back an answer that is grounded in those sources. So it is a way of getting our apps to answer questions based off of our particular domain. And we have this sample that uses Azure AI Search plus Azure OpenAI to do RAG, and it is our most popular sample by far. It's been deployed thousands of times. It has a huge number of features, and it's really, really fully featured. So you can grab the code for that at aka.ms/ragchat, and you can get started with it today if you want to just get a RAG solution deployed today. But I'll go ahead and, show you it. So I've got it running here, right? So I ask a question, which benefits are there? And then I can see the citations here, right? So I, click on a citation and see where the answer came from. I can see, oh, okay, it was from page 3 of this PDF. And so I can go and get more information, right? So we get this grounded answer, we get citations, we can go and check to see and get more information from wherever it got its source. So that is our, basic RAG application. And I was saying, this does go to AI search when it's getting the results. So you can actually see in this thought process here where it searches AI search and gets back results, which are these, matching document chunks, and then sends them to the LLM. So this is the architecture. So we host the app on app service. When we get a request, we use Azure AI Search as our search index to find whatever matches the query. And then we use Azure OpenAI to answer the question using those sources. And here is really basic Python code for a RAG with AI Search. I'm showing the basic code to start off with because, our actual code in the repo is it's a lot more complex because it does have a lot of features in it. It has to cover a lot of edge case and stuff like this. But, I want to show the basics code to help understand code that you might see later in this presentation, right? So the first thing we do is actually a query rewriting step, which is where we take the user's query and we ask an LLM to clean it up. And then we use that cleaned up query and we send that to Azure AI Search and say, hey, will you please search your search index for this search query and find the matching results. And then we answer using the LLM by passing it, the results and the answer question. So that's basic RAG, and it's saying you can see it here in the UI as well, where here's our rewriting step where we say, okay, that's the user's query. It rewrites it into just benefits, right? So it took this user query, what benefits are there, rewrote it into benefits, and then got back the results for it, and then sent both the user's question, what benefits are there? So that's the original question, and the search results to the LLM and got back the response. Okay, so that was, our 5-minute intro to RAG. And now we can talk about how we can add data access control to that RAG application. And for this, I'm going over to Matt.
Thanks so much, Pamela, for that great intro. I wanted to, maybe we can go over to my slides now. Awesome, perfect. So this section is really all about, we have a basic RAG application, as Pamela described, and we now have a new problem. There are many people using this RAG application, and not all of them should be able to see their own data. So what does that actually mean? Like, how do we actually make sure that users can only see their specific data? So we're going to go take a look at the sample that we just saw, but we're going to have a bunch of new things here. First off, we're going to have a login and a log out button. I've already logged out. So now I can ask the same questions, right? I can ask what's included in my North One Health Plus plan that's not in standard. But there's a little bit of a difference now, particularly when I go to the thought process tab. I have to wait for the response to fully come in before I do that. So everything here is the same, but now when we ask the question, there's some additional components here, namely something called a filter. And when I go into my developer settings section, I'm going to see a bunch of additional information that is essentially just metadata about who I am as a user. So really what we need to figure out how we're going to do is, how are we going to take this concept of, hey, I now have the same RAG application, but I'm going to add some additional filters to make sure that users can't see documents they're not supposed to have access to. So how does this actually work? So there's a couple more complicated things we need to understand as we get into this. So first off, we're going to be adding some new components to our application architecture. Namely, we're going to be introducing the concept of Microsoft Entra ID. What is Entra ID? Really, it's all about making sure people are who they say they are. You have the concept of a tenant, which represents an organization. Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a nonprofit, but it's basically some kind of organization users, a users to person, are a member of. When we actually log in to our application, logging in is kind of a more complicated process that Microsoft Entra ID really abstracts away from us. All we really need to worry about is saying, hey, I want to log in, and Microsoft Entra ID handles all the details. There's a couple of more complicated ways you can log in. The easiest way by far is to use an authentication code. So you can basically imagine a pop-up box, and I'll actually show you here, where basically if I go, I log out of my application, and I go to log in. Actually, I have to log out of this one too. I go to log in. I actually don't write any code for any of this. This is all included with the Microsoft Entra SDKs. So when I actually go in, you can't see because I'm off screen, but on my phone, I've got an authentication dialog. I have to enter this code. So the benefit of using Microsoft Entra ID here is that I don't actually need to implement any of this besides how the login button shows up on my web page. So that's all kind of abstracted away from me. So we're going to go back to this slide. So once I've completed my authentication dialog, I get a token back that I can then use to authenticate to the actual API using calls. There's some more kind of token exchanges here that go on, which is kind of a more internal detail. I will look at the code a bit later as to how that exactly works. But basically, once I've logged in, I am authenticated to be myself, and I can actually call the Microsoft Graph API. So when we look at these tokens that we're getting back from Microsoft Entra ID, these are really the key to actually making authentication work and proving you are who you say you are. So when I go back to this application and I open the developer settings tab, we've included a user interface where you can actually inspect these token claims yourself. All these token claims are, as we're seeing in this slide, they're really just, it's a JSON object. Think of it that way. There are keys and there are values. Some of these have kind of like strange names like odd issue, issued at time. But basically what these are is they are cryptographically verified to be from Microsoft Entra ID. They can't be forged. So I can't just take an arbitrary JSON object and say, hey, I am this person, let me in. It has to actually be issued by Microsoft Entra ID. So the advantage of using all these claims is that, hey, this guy really is who he says he is. There's some special claims that we're going to actually be taking advantage of in order to implement this authentication, namely OID, which is the object identifier of the user. It's a globally unique identifier. So even though I'm mapped to the system, I'm 8D5 and then a bunch of other characters and numbers. I could also be a member of groups. Basically, groups are collections of users. So like, let's say it's like, hey, I've got a bunch of PDFs that users A, B, and C can have access to. Rather than having to memorize all their object identifiers, I can just use a group and just say, hey, this group has access to it. And that dramatically simplifies managing access. So we understand kind of how logging in works. We understand what tokens are, we understand claims, but what we're missing is the way that this access control is actually set up in AI Search. So AI Search has a really flexible index specification method. An index is essentially a collection of things you can search. So in our case, in the demo, we provide a bunch of PDFs that are fake employment documents for a fictional company called Contoso, namely around their health benefit plans. So when you want to map this, how do we actually put these documents into AI Search? Well, first thing you need is a key field, which uniquely identifies the documents. To actually add access control, we have two additional fields. Namely, we call them OIDs and groups. And these are actually collections of strings. What we're basically saying here is that, hey, any given PDF, like the question I asked about what's better, Northwind Health Standard or Health Plus, there could be many users that have access to this document, not just one. So I model saying, hey, there could be many users basing this collection of edm.string, rather than just edm.string, which would basically mean one user has access to it. I also set this extra attribute called filterable, which enables me to use this filter feature, which I lost it here, but I'll get it back and I'll show you the filter once we get to the next slide. So now that we understand how the documents are actually modeled in the index, how do we actually use this filter to actually make sure that when we search our search index for documents to do RAG, we're only picking the documents that I should have access to? There's a syntax here that uses this function called search.in. Basically, what it does is it can performantly search the index for tens of thousands of these strings very quickly. So you don't really need to worry if you're like part of a large enterprise or a large nonprofit that has thousands of users. You can execute these searches across a single index very efficiently using this search.in filter. So you can basically just say, hey, I have this user who's logged in. When I issue the search, we're waiting for the streaming to finish here before I show you the thought process again. But once this is finished, we can see that it's like, hey, this user, so this GUID right here, this is my identity in the system. So inside the search index, I actually have this field uploaded to the index. There's also a feature we relatively recently added that lets you search documents that have no access control. So imagine you've got like a bunch of common documents, like basically just saying like, hey, welcome to Contoso, how are you doing? Like that could be a document with no access control. So this filter right here is how we implemented it. We basically just said, hey, if this document has no access control specified, always return it. But for the documents that do have access control specified, you need to specifically specify the identifier of the user that's logged in, or their groups, in which case I'm part of a group here, so you can see the group ID showing up here. So this filter is super easy to construct. If we jump into the Python code, there is some code. Let me scroll down here. Not this one. There we go. Yeah, so there's some Python code in here. So if you go to the GitHub repository, there's a file called authentication.py. And you can actually kind of see that there's some code that basically just says, hey, given some object identifiers, just all you have to do is just write this special formatted string. So you can review this code if you want to learn more about how the filter is constructed, but it's just a string that's interpreted by AI search. That's really all there is to it. So that's great that we can kind of add these filters. We can search them, but there's another problem. Let's say that things change with the organization and I lose access to a document that I previously had access to. Like, let's say I used to be a salesperson, I could see sales reports, but now I'm not supposed. I've transitioned roles. I've either quit and I identity deleted, or I decided I wanted to change. I want to be an engineer now. I shouldn't have access to those sales reports. Well, there's a very easy way to do it because basically in AI search, there's multiple ways to update a document. You can either re-specify every single field in the document that's in the index schema, and you use a special, it's called @search.action. If you specify the @search.action upload, you're replacing every single field in the document. You need to specify that in request. But if you only want to change one field, for example, hey, this document has one less user, this document has one less group or one more group, there's a special action called merge. And once I use the special action called merge, all I need to do is I need to just change this object identifier field or this groups field. And I've actually adapted the access control to that, to the new requirements. So this is all great, right? Because we know how to filter, we know how to update access control, we know how to specify it. But how do I actually get access control into the index in the first place? There's another service in Azure called Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This storage, it's like a special storage account with two main changes. Number one, folders, unlike in blob storage where folders are kind of virtual, they don't actually exist, folders in Data Lake Storage Gen 2 are actually addressable. And you can actually add access control to individual files and folders. It uses the special syntax called POSIX access control. So you're going to see this fancy syntax like user : RWX. The same semantics, if you're familiar with POSIX ACLs, if you ever use Linux, it basically says, can I read this file? Can I write this file? Can I execute it? They've actually been remapped to mean different things in Data Lake Gen 2. For the purposes of using RAG, really the two we care about are read and write, or more accurately just read, because we're not actually updating any files here. Basically, in Data Lake Gen 2, if you've marked a file as readable by a specific user, we've provided sample code in our repo to actually go and take that data. It's in the prep docs code. So if I go to, not approaches, if I go to prep docs lib and I go to file strategy, there is a specific file strategy for Data Lake Gen 2. It's in list file strategy right here. So basically what it does is it actually goes to Data Lake Gen 2 and it uses the special function called get access control to actually list all these POSIX ACLs, and it shows you how to parse it and then upload that parsed ACLs to AI search. So it kind of bridges these two distinct access control systems and unifies them. So this is just one way you can get access control in. So we've got the code pulled out here, where basically all you need to do is you need to get the container that the file is stored in. You get the specific file you want. There's one parameter called user principal name. So there's basically by default, it tries to clean up those POSIX ACLs for you and remove the GUIDs. But in our case, we've represented access control using GUIDs. So we need to actually turn that off. So for example, I don't want to get my name mapped because we're not storing access control via using my name. We're storing it using my GUID. Once we get it, we just need to parse it. So there's two general ways we can think about actually hydrating a search index with access control information. The first way to think about it is you actually have an index that's been pre-built with the access control information. Like, let's say, like, hey, I'm reading from data lake storage. I've got all my access control set up. I can actually ingest it with the access control list. We provide sample code to do this, and I can actually search with a filter. And this is a great approach if your original data source or your data index has that access control in it. If I don't, well, maybe there's a separate place. I've stored my access control distinctly from the storage. Maybe I'm using a regular storage account that doesn't support using access control. Maybe my access control information is somewhere else. Maybe it's stored in a text file somewhere, in this example. So all I really need to do is I need to join those two pieces of information, because when I upload documents to AI Search, I can upload them first. Maybe I upload it without access control, or maybe I upload the access control first. But basically, using that merge action, I can kind of say, I don't need both site sources information in the same place. I can have the data stored separately from the access control, but as long as it lands in the RAG index with access control, the filter will work properly. This all kind of begs a really interesting question, which is, I think it's great that we can use filters to perform access control, but wouldn't it be simpler if you have an index per user? Unfortunately, AI Search has strict limitations around indexes per user. We offer different tiers of AI Search that cost different amounts of money per month. The tier with the most indexes is S3 HD, which stands for S3 high density. It's basically the same performance as a standard 3 SKU, but with many smaller indexes. The downside of using this tier is that it only supports a maximum of 3,000 indexes per service, and the maximum index size is 100 gigabytes. So if you have lots of users up to 3,000 with less than 100 gigabytes each, you're more than welcome to have an index per user, but the filtering approach is more dynamic because it allows you to have a single index for many users. So that kind of covers how do we actually add access control to RAG application, and I wanted to turn it back over to Camilla to talk about how to use user uploaded documents.
All right, thank you, Matt. So once Matt implemented all of that code to be able to have user login and data access control. Oh, actually, Matt, can you mute your mic because you're picking up my mic? Yeah, thank you. Yes, and just unmute yourself when if you want to come back on. So once he had all that implemented, then I was able to add a feature that many people had been wanting for the RAG application, which is the ability for users to upload their own documents, right? Because there's many documents that people have access to globally, but they want to upload their own documents too, for whatever they're working with as well. And so it's a nice feature to have in a RAG application to give users more control with what they can do. So this feature builds on top of everything that Matt showed. So if you want to enable this feature, you can go to aka.ms/ragchat/upload and follow the instructions there for enabling it for this repo. But this does assume that you have first enabled everything that Matt just showed as well. So let's go ahead and check it out. It's pretty fun, actually. So let's see. All right. So I am currently logged in. And you can see I'm actually logged in locally, so we can also test this out locally. So I'm logged in locally. I have this manage file uploads now, and you can see that I've uploaded a few files here. So I've uploaded a docx, some PDFs, and a TXT. So we basically support all the file formats are supported for user uploads that we support for ingestion. So let's go ahead and upload another file to see what happens. So it's it's uploading the file, so it's sending it to the server, it's storing it and associating it with me so that I will have it in my list, so that now I can ask questions about it. So now I can say which strawberry, let me get this bigger, which strawberry plant would be best for full sun? I just had to cut down all the trees at my house in order to be able to get insurance. And so now we have a lot of sun. So I need to figure out how to get some more full sun plants. So it says the beach strawberry would be best for full sun, and that's true. The 2 native strawberries, that is the correct one. And so it got that PDF that I had uploaded, and it can even render that PDF. Sometimes it takes a second to load that citation. Let me see if I can get it to render it. There we go. So this is what it parsed, was this information here, and that's where it got the answer from. And now I can see it. And I'm actually the only one that can see this citation. So that's part of why like our citation can take a few seconds to show up, is because it is actually doing checks to make sure that, hey, can the currently logged in user view this citation? So we are not simply rendering up a blob URL, right? Because that would mean we had our blob URLs exposed to the world and anyone could see them, right? That would be a bad idea. We are actually checking to see, okay, who's this user? Do they have access to this URL? Okay, if they do, then we're going to use the blob SDK to pull it down, and then we're going to serve it back to the front end as a binary, and then the front end is going to render that binary file. So that's the sort of thing that you have to think about when adding user controls to a RAG application, is, not just constraining the search, but also constraining the citation viewing as well. And now if we look at the thought process for this, we can see that filter that Matt talked about, right? So it's, checking to see looking for my user ID or my group. And if we look at the results here, you can see that the results have my OID and only my OID. So, Matt would not be able to find out which strawberry plant is best for full sun. That's good. You probably don't have full sun in Seattle. It just doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. It would die. So it's good. I can't see that. Be disappointed.
Yeah. We'll ask for Matt. We'll find would be best for Seattle. Let's see if it gets that right. Don't update right now. The woodland strawberry. There you go. So Matt, for woodland, you would want the woodland strawberry. I agree. But I am the only one that can do this search, because I'm the only OID that is on these, because I'm the one that uploaded them. So that's what it's like from the user perspective. And now let's check it out. Like, what is the actual architecture of that? All right. So the user uploads some document, and we store that in Data Lake Storage Gen 2. This Azure service has the longest name in the world, but you can also just think of it as being blob storage with, hierarchy and access control. That's basically what it is. It's blob storage with hierarchical access control and structure. So it's a really good fit when we're dealing with, access control. So we create a new Data Lake Storage Gen 2 that's going to store all of the user stuff, and we put all of the user's uploads in a folder based off that user's OID, and we give ACLs to that folder that are just for that user. So if I've got this open over here, right? So let me just go up. Okay, so here you can see I'm the only user so far in this one. I only deployed it today. But if I added Matt to this one, then we would, we'd be able to see a folder for him here. And then if I go and look at, let me click on this one and say, let's see, manage ACL. So what you can see is that I am actually marked as an owner. And that's because I was, it is the folder for my uploads. And then we can also check and see similarly the ACLs on here. We've got those read-write ACLs there. So this is a neat thing. Like, it's really trying to, give all the ownership rights to the user for the stuff that they upload. Right now, we could have uploaded and not set the user access controls, because all of these requests are going through the app. But in theory, the way I've done it, even if the app stops working, the user actually, in theory, would be able to, delete these apps, even not through these docs, even not through the UI. All right, so we uploaded there to the folder. We assign the ACLs. And then we send it through our usual data ingestion process. So we extract, all the information using Azure Document Intelligence. And that's why we're able to support so many different data formats like doc and PDF and text and all that. Then we do our splitting, chunking into appropriately sized chunks. Then we embed it using Azure OpenAI. And so this is our usual process here, what we do for everything. And then finally index it in AI search. And when we index in AI search, we're making sure that we're tracking who has access to it, right? So, once again, if we go to AI search and I look at the one that I uploaded, one of them that I uploaded, we can see that the OID is my OID. And we've also got the full storage URL for it. So that's how we know exactly which file this is, because that's another thing to keep in mind when you implement that, is that two different people might upload a file with the same name, right? And so we want to make sure that we're never going to find code.txt that Matt uploaded when I'm asking a question from my code.txt. So that was something that we also needed to keep in mind when we were implementing this feature. So we've got the file name that's used by the app for displaying citations, but then this is what actually indicates truly what is the unique path of this file here. So we end up in Azure AI Search, and we've got those OIDs as we showed. And this is simplified code for the user upload code, right? So we get the file from the request, we get the OID from the currently authenticated user's claims, we find the directory for that user. If it doesn't exist, we create that directory. We set the access control of that directory to the current user and say, okay, this user is now the owner. And then finally, we upload the file and we set the ACLs on that file, and then also ingest that file and set the ACLs. So that's the simplified code, and it's actually not even that that much more complicated in the code itself. Okay, so that was the user upload feature. Let me see if we had. Do we have any questions that we want to cover here? I know there was an earlier question basically about how can you handle guest users, and so everything we've shown here is using what we call like Entra ID, and we're doing it with Entra ID for our organization. So if we look at, let's see. Scene where I can bring up the configuration of the authentication here. Okay, yeah, this one. So if we look at the Entra registration, and let's see, it is set up for, so supported account types is my organization only. Okay, so the way we have this set up, this is only going to, allow login from people in this tenant. So this is using Entra ID. There is another option, which is Entra External ID, which allows you to, have people come in from anywhere, right? Like, if you're making it, basically, if you're making a public facing app, then you would want to use Entra External ID to allow anyone to sign up for your app. And there you can use the one-time passcode flow where, they just sign in and you just get like an email or an SMS that just says, hey, here's your code, just use this to sign in. That's a really nice flow. It's a really good fit for the kind of applications that people don't use a ton and they just want to log in once a week and do something with. You could also do something like connect with LinkedIn, Google, Facebook, various OpenID providers. And so that is possible with Entra. In the repo itself, we don't have external ID automated, but it is definitely possible to configure it. There's actually an active issue this week and where we're discussing about external ID. And Zed, who was a winner in the last hackathon, he actually kindly wrote up a whole document for us about how the ad hoc solution for setting up external ID in conjunction with this repo. So it's definitely possible. There's more we can do to automate it. And, hopefully we can bring in code that would, make it completely automated, because there is a little bit of setup, right? There's definitely a little bit of setup involved with any sort of Entra ID. But then the cool thing is once you have it set up, then, then it just works. And then you have, all the features that you want from a user login system, right? And you don't have to deal with passcodes and MFA and reset and all that stuff, right? It is all implemented for you. So it is worth it to, go through that extra setup so that you can have a, really well working authentication system.
So just summarizing a couple of questions that came in. We had a question about how to ingest content from Google Drive. Unfortunately, we do not have an out-of-the-box connector for that, but the general strategy is to keep track of the most recently updated file. We then had another question about, hey, does AI Search index the same documents twice if there's version 1 and version 2? Documents in AI Search are separated by key. So if version 1 and version 2 have the same key, that means that version 2 replaces version 1. If in the case that we were showing using data lake storage, the key of the document is its location in the file system. So what that basically means is that it will replace it rather than create a second version. And then we had another question about is it easier to set up a guest user or allowing users from other tenants? I'm assuming that that's really about what Pamela was talking about just now about external ID. But do you have anything else you want to say about that, Pamela?
Right. Well, so Road Lake there says allow specific from other tenants. So that sounds like the multi-tenant. So multi-tenant is still considered an Entra ID versus external ID, because I think I can just do that by changing this little toggle right here. So multi-tenant should be very easy to set up. I think this would be one line of code in our, let me see if I can find it's like Azure AD. Yeah, that one, right? Right. So here is where we set up the application and we say what the sign-in audience is. So we are defaulting to my org. I can't remember what the other value is. See if Copilot was going to just guess it. But there's different values you can put in there, right? So generally, this is where we configure all the, application permissions and rules and stuff like that. And so setting up a single tenant versus a multi-tenant, I think is mostly just changing this.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that tenants still require somebody to be registered with Entra ID. The external ID is very useful when, let's say, you want arbitrary users that maybe they're using Facebook logins, maybe using Google logins, but the advantage of external ID is they don't need to be added as a guest. They don't need a home tenant. Multi-tenant applications still require someone to have a tenant in the first place.
Yeah. So I think it should be pretty clear once you actually figure out who your audience is, whether you're making a single tenant application, a multi-tenant application, or one that requires external ID, because just you'll just be able to see like, oh, okay, I need these people to be able to log in. Therefore, I need to create this sort of application. If you are interested in external ID, like they have a really nice setup for it now. And I shared this in the chat earlier, but we have this template here, which is just a simple AI app, no RAG, but it uses a really similar set of scripts, except that this one can also set up external ID. So I've set this up actually just on my personal account, just to be able to let people sign into my little chat apps. You just have to, specify like, okay, this is going to be, this is where we're deploying to. This is going to be the login endpoint for external ID. So you'll get this, endpoint that looks like this when you set up external ID, and then you can just deploy it and it'll have it all set up. But there's also an external ID wizard that you can go through that will also step you through how to make something with external ID. So if you are interested in external ID, definitely check it out. They've made it a lot easier to use in the last year. I was really impressed by the wizard that they have set up. So do check it out, and we'll try to make it more easy to do in all of our applications going forward, because I know there's a lot of interest in doing, public-facing applications in addition to internal-facing applications. Oh yeah, and yeah, with the ID, yeah, you can. That's something actually worth mentioning as well. The ID here, when I store the ID, I make a hash based off the user ID here. It's really long, but that's way I ensured that the ID of this document would not collide with another user's document. So I think I hashed the user ID, and maybe I hashed some. Maybe I also hashed the storage URL. I don't remember, but. That's definitely another thing you want to keep in mind, right? And so it's true whether you're using AI search or using any other sort of store. If you're going to be implementing access control, like you have to think about if you're going to be, mixing things together, you really need to think about uniqueness and identification and making sure that you have properly thought through what needs to be unique, what happens when there are possible collisions of file names, usernames, right? One thing that we need to get across is that we should not be using emails or display names or even usernames. I think all of those are considered to be fungible. Let's see, does this one give me my token? Oh no, it doesn't actually give me the token. Wait, what's the URL where I can just get a token? I forget.
If this is the publicly deployed version, it's .auth.me. But if it's
not, but I don't have the
you just look at the claims. But
yeah, I wanted to show the claims. But if you go to jw.ms, do you have one set up where we could switch to you so you could show it? Because it's really, really cool, and it'll explicitly tell you which things you should mess with.
Let me see if I can get a token. But you can actually just get a token just using AZ. So let me.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Do you want to just get a token using AZ account?
Yeah.
Get an access token. So it's just the AZ account space get-access-token. You run that.
I don't know if AZ is, because I'm doing I have multiple tenants, and I'm not sure whether AZ is. I think AZ is currently using this tenant. Let's see.
Yeah, but even if it isn't, you'll see what tenant it's using in the claim.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'll still be able to type to paste it in.
Yeah.
All right, it's thinking. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is the access token that I got back. And then we can enter the token here, and it even syntax highlighted. So this is the token header, the token body, and the token footer. Sorry, it's made
signature.
Thank you. So here you can see it breaks down everything that's part of this token. These are what we call the claims. They're really just key value pairs, but it actually says it'll tell you which one with name, this value is not guaranteed to be unique. It is mutable. So it makes a note of which things are mutable that you definitely shouldn't be using, because even ones that kind of surprise people. Oh, I don't have email in this one, but even if it passed down email, sometimes you will get email, in the ID token. Oh, there's email. Yeah. So, this one, you should not be using this one as an identifier. So basically you should only be using OID, or the groups, and other things are just meant for display purposes. Oh, and even this one, unique name it's called unique name. It says this value is not guaranteed to be unique within tenant and should be only used for display purposes. So even if something is called unique name, do not trust it. Only trust OID. OID is our one true item. All right. Anything else?
I don't see any more questions.
Sweet. Okay, so if you have follow-up questions, you can put them in the discussion thread that we will share in the chat. So if you're watching now and you have follow-up questions, or if you're watching later and you have follow-up questions, you can find the discussion thread in our aka.ms/raghack, and you can post questions there. If you are actually trying out the Azure Search OpenAI demo repo and going through the steps here, then go ahead and file an issue. We do have a lot of issues, but we do also try to reply to as many as possible. So we just want to see what things we're running into and how we can make it easier for you to use authentication and access control in your applications. And yeah, we will be posting the link in the chat. And let's see, do we have it here? Yeah, there it is. So there's the link, and we'll put all the stuff there. Oh, and yeah, here's the additional resources that you can go to. So there's our repo. Matt has an amazing blog post that you should read through, which goes actually even into more detail than we went into today, at least in some parts. So if you want to, a review, dig deeper into what we talked about, check out his very comprehensive blog post. And then you can also learn more about Microsoft Entra in the Entra Developer Center. Cool. All right. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, everyone, for the great questions and comments.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really enjoyed this show today. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Hey, everyone. Hope you enjoyed today's session.
If you aren't registered yet for RagHack, you can register now at aka.ms/raghack/register, and you can introduce yourself on our forum. You can start hacking either by looking at one of our code samples or just starting from scratch. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to post them in our GitHub discussion forum, and you can also attend live office hours in our Discord. Once your project is ready, make sure to submit it before September 16th at 11:59 p.m. PT to be eligible for our cash prizes. And of course, make sure to join our upcoming live streams to learn more about RAG. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to both of our speakers. To view past sessions, learn more about the series, and register for future sessions, you can follow the link at the bottom of the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link on the screen or in the chat. We'll see you at the next one.